Alrighty. So it's 5:02, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. But I just mentioned for those of you guys watching who walked in, I am recording this, and so any questions that you ask, I always like to just make sure you know that you're gonna be saved in history forever on the archives of YouTube. But if you ever miss a meeting, we also will record these and present them as well. I know that 5:00 isn't very convenient for me either, but it's just the way it kind of works. And so if you ever miss it or can't make it or for any reason, we'll do our best to record these as long as you don't have technical issues. So tonight we're going to spend probably about an hour. We'll see kind of how questions go and how long I ramble on, but we'll try to keep it within an hour. We'll work through some information that's pretty crucial for the rising seniors. Okay, so that's the class of 2023. And what we're going to need to know about applying and working through and preparing, really utilizing the summer effectively as we go into a pretty busy senior year. All right. And I do want to kind of preface that this class, as well as kind of this graduating class this year, have had a pretty tough high school experience. Everyone I think experienced a lot with COVID, I think educationally, as well as kind of some of this particular stuff here. You missed out on a lot of some of the pathway curriculum that we went through and different things that we would have done with you in the, primarily your 9th and 10th grade. But even this year is running at a slower pace than what I would say is normal in a high school experience. And so there is some grains of salt that we're walking into this season with. I'm kind of aware of some of the big things, but I want you to know too, like colleges and other people that are also reviewing some of this stuff are also aware of the impact. And it's not just North Tahoe High School, it is every high school across the country, and every student that's gonna be walking through the doors is coming in with some level of impact from the last couple of years in our educational experience and our growth and learning opportunities. Okay. Please do feel free to stop and ask questions as we go if they pop up. I'm going to kind of skip through here. We do have translation here, and hopefully we have a couple parents that will show up, but Angelica's here, and she's very kind to spend time with us and work on helping make sure that everyone has access to this. But if anybody's watching online, here's how you can get some more information. The presentation is not in Spanish, but we do have it accessible there. Like I said, we got a couple things that we're going to cover. We'll probably spend about 15 or so minutes, maybe 20 minutes on each of these to kind of get us through the hour. But we're going to talk about kind of the big picture, what the overview of this kind of time into the senior year and through senior year will look like. We'll talk about this idea of fit and how that works in the important process of college admissions and how we're developing some of our lists. We'll talk about how applications actually work, what types of applications are available, what are some pretty common deadlines. Talk about how to do some research and how we actually develop lists. I don't know, students, you don't need to raise your hand, but like how many of you actually have lists already and how confident are you on the list? I know most juniors are probably not at that point, and it's okay to have a list, but it will probably continue to evolve over the summer and believe it or not, even through your senior fall. Most typically, sometimes I'm seeing seniors adding lists the day they're applying, and all of a sudden things do change. And then we'll talk about some best practices. What are some resources? What are some myths that we might come up against as we go through this process? Because believe it or not, there's a lot of really good advice and there's a lot of really bad advice about this process. And, when we work on this college admissions process, there's very few black and white things, right? There's very few like, do this, don't do this. It's really about understanding who you are as a student. And when I say you, I mean you with a student, right? And this is hard for parents sometimes, parents and families and stuff like that. You have to kind of take yourself out of the equation to a level, right? We can't live vicariously through our kids, right? And so we have to really let the students develop who they are. And it can be very frustrating. It can be very frustrating at times, especially if, say, your child is not really on the ball. Maybe you're a type A and they're a type B. But typically it all works out. Okay. So I want you to take some of that pressure off of yourself getting through that process. Just remember it's their process and they're going to work through it and we're going to help them. But, it's really, we'll talk more about kind of our different roles. I want to just, again, highlight some assumptions that we are not quite out of COVID yet. We're starting to hit all these things. I think everyone's like, COVID's over, like, forget it never happened. Like, we're better. I think we are in a better place, but we are definitely going to still see the rolling impacts of COVID, probably for a number of years beyond this one. Okay. But, they are still in a resetting phase at the college level, just like we are. Right? School and classes are still, hey.
We were all in the wrong place.
Oh, sorry.
I bet they all went to the auditorium.
Come on in. Oh, nice. Hello. Come in. Do you guys head to the auditorium?
Yeah. You didn't tell us where it was.
Oh yeah, Laker Lab. Laker Lab.
You didn't say it on that.
Sorry, apologize. Come on in. Glad you're here now. Find a seat. We're just getting started. We went over some agenda stuff. So ultimately, what we're still looking at is this lasting impact of admissions and things like that, where ultimately, we're going to see some of these waves continue to roll as we go through the upcoming year. So we're going to still roll with the punches as they come. We can't predict what's going to happen in the fall, but we just want to make sure that we understand there is some unpredictability about this process and understanding kind of the impacts of that. Okay. So ultimately, we have a wealth of information that I've kind of spent a lot of time developing, because I feel like I'm only here from 7 to 3:30 most days, and so I'm accessible during those times, but maybe you're available at 9 o'clock at night, or maybe, you have some time later on, or whatever it might be. I've tried to put a bunch of information that you can have access whenever works for you on the counseling website. And we do keep it up to date as much as possible. Like I said, this is being recorded. It's going to be available on our YouTube page, which goes on our website. But we have, for example, a college handbook that's up there that you can utilize. We have links to other resources that I'll mention in a second. We also have how to contact myself and how to contact other individuals. For example, next year, we're actually going to be hiring a career tech who works with some of the different industries. So we're going to be focusing on a lot of high-level stuff, and they're going to be working on resumes, working on supporting some of our CT pathway pieces. They'll be doing some stuff with community service, which has an impact in things like college admissions. All right, and so we'll be having some new staff members as well joining the team, but you can get a bunch of information about our upcoming AP exams or different things that are going on. So please do bookmark that. I think it'll be a pretty important piece, and I'll highlight a few particular sections that are relevant to tonight's conversation. One of those things that is really helpful right now, which if you did your junior ILP meeting, I kind of highlighted a little bit of, is this idea of a fit kit. We'll talk more about what a fit kit is, but this group called Capex, there's a number of other counseling organizations, college advising groups, that kind of stuff, that make their resources available to the public online, all right, for free. This is one of them. There's a number of other ones. But this Capex Fit Kit is a really nice toolkit that students can use. And what they do is they go through and have people kind of write down, like, for example, it'll have a page on what are your college priorities? What are the things that matter to you? Okay, and it'll have you write things down that this is what stands out as being really crucial to me as a student. Is it the size? Is it the location? Okay, and it will really break down some pretty good stuff. This is another one down here. It's called School Buff, and it asks a number of other kind of leading questions. Okay, it's like a counselor on paper. Okay, and you're going to answer the questions, and it will help guide you through identifying themes, which is really what's an important part of this process. Okay, when we're building this list, we'll talk about lists again in a little bit, but it's about building a theme. We're going to start noticing things about what matters and stands out in our interest area. All right. So these are two really great resources. I would highly encourage you to download them. They are available on the counseling website, where you can go up there and there's an area called College and Career Counseling. Link right there straight to these two resources if you need to access them again later. Okay. So let's talk. I mentioned fit. Let's talk a little bit about what that actually means. Okay. Because back in the day, they used to really say safety, like middle of the road, and like reach. They used to categorize it by that, and I think that has changed a little bit more. They still sometimes will use those words, but realistically, they're really focused on this idea of every student's different, right? What's going to be a good fit for one student is going to be very different for another student, all right? And so I think sometimes we get in this groupthink mindset in college world, and I think more the kids than anything. Where's my friends going? Everybody's going to go to this school. Everybody likes this particular place. All right. And realistically, we do want to find this middle ground between needs and wants. Right. And sometimes those are two very different things. You might say, I need to live at the beach. And that might be a need, but I would probably say that might not be a need. That might be a want. but you might need small class sizes because that's how you learn as a student. All right. So really identifying, and again, that's kind of what those fit kits work on, is identifying what is a need and what is something that I just want. What's something that's a desire for me. All right. So here are some things that might impact this idea of fit. So location and size. Okay. Those are pretty typical starting places. We kind of look at the big umbrella picture. All right. So location and size is a pretty often a starting place because it helps narrow schools down. Believe it or not, there's almost 3,000 four-year universities in the United States. Okay. That's a lot. All right. And so even spending any meaningful time researching any number of that size is impossible. So in all reality, we have to start narrowing the field and the focus before we even do any type of meaningful research. So we're going to start looking at some of these larger big picture things that kind of narrow our focus down and really zoom in on this picture of what is it that we're really looking for so we can do meaningful research on the stuff that matters. All right. So location and size are usually one of the biggest things. Like people saying, like, I want to go to the East Coast. I want to go to this, LA area. I want to stay close to home. I want to go to Montana. All these different types of things are a great starting place. Okay. Including things like social and environmental interests and concerns, right? I put interests and concerns very purposefully. Interest being like, I'm really into mountain biking. Okay. If you're going to go down to, West Covina, it might not be the best place for mountain biking versus going to Bozeman or something like that. Okay, you might find different areas that you really are attracted to based on your interests, and that's really great. The other piece is concerns. A lot of people ignore the bad stuff in this research, believe it or not. You focus so much on this. What are the great things about this school I'm into, or this place I want to move to? And sometimes we get blinders on to what are the things I need to be worried about that are not quite so pretty. What are the things that might impact me that I'm not thinking about? LA sounds great. Traffic, not so much. All right. Cost of living here. Distance from home here. Okay. There's all these things that you do want to have kind of a devil's advocate mindset in some way. Okay. You want to be aware of some of the pitfalls that could potentially make a difference for you. Okay. So avoid the blinders. Again, you want to keep the positive focus, but you want to be aware of what's going on. And then also looking at things like how you learn. Because believe it or not, you're going to college to learn. Right? It's not a giant party. It's not a giant football game. Okay. Those are the things that come with the learning. All right. So that's actually a really important one that a lot of people kind of skip over and really kind of like, oh, it's ranked really good. According to who? Right? Who's doing the ranking and with what circumstances? Put a lot of energy and effort into some of these things. And really you should be asking questions like, what are the class sizes? What's the 4 and 6 year graduation rates? How many upperclassmen maybe get research opportunities? Do they offer that to underclassmen? So like those are the type of academic questions, they might even do a difference in learning. We'll talk about UCs and CSUs a little later. And there's some pretty big differences in how they do some teaching. Okay. So those are some pretty big, large elements of fit that we're going to dive into a little bit more. And realistically, what it kind of comes down to, how many of you ever sat in a job interview? Awesome. Even some students. Great. So job interviews are a lot like the college admissions and college research process. All right. A lot of times when we think about this, we're thinking one directional. All right. We're thinking a transaction that's one directional. Will the college take me or not? Do I meet their needs? Do I have the best grades? Do I have the right test scores or extracurriculars, things like that? And in reality, we're missing a big important part of the conversation, which is, is that kind of college or job opportunity a good fit for me as a person? Like, do I agree with their mottos? Do I agree with their ideas and thought and their what they stand for as a school and things like that? So am I going to fit within that culture? And it's not just about do they want me or not, it's do I want them as well? All right. So it's important to just really think about how are we going to be kind of this two-way street in this whole process. Here's a couple other big fit tools that are really, really helpful. One of the hardest things about research is time. Okay. Time is one of the largest elements and unfortunately, one of the most boring elements related to this process. Because students, I'm sorry, there's no other way to get around it, but realistically, in order for you to do a good job researching, you have to put in the time. It's like working out. You can't just get fit by sitting on your couch. You got to go to the gym. You got to run the mile. Okay. All these types of things are the same process. When you are going to put in the time and energy to do your research and do it well, you're going to get good returns. Okay. But it takes that energy and effort to get going. So these are 4 kind of pretty good research tools. One of these big features, that's from the College Board. Okay. So if you have a College Board account, most likely you already actually have this. You have access to it. It'll pull things in, like if you took the PSAT or the AP tests and things like that, it'll pull some of your scores in. Okay. And you can plug in and use some of their research tools. It's fairly good. I'm not a huge College Board fan. Okay. But this tool is pretty decent. We are actually going to be switching from Naviance into a new program. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. It's called Score. Very similar, actually probably better, but we're going to switch. It's going to have very similar tool sets. I just don't have it available to show you where I would today. But it has a really good college search tool as well. Okay, that's very similar. If you've used Naviance at all, or if any of your older children have, it has a very similar set of tools and resources in there. These are 2 books that I find really helpful in this time of the year as well. I know books, right? Old school, but they're pretty great. Rug's recommendation is more about the majors. All right. And what that does, this guy built a company. He updates it every year. It's something you can go purchase. I want to say it's like $30, but they go around and they quantitatively look at majors and what schools offer particular majors based on a set of criteria and say these schools provide a pretty good quality education in these particular majors. I would trust these 2 guys more than like your U.S. News and World Report and Niche and those guys. Those guys are marketing tools, money-making machines, okay? And colleges have kind of gotten in trouble for fudging their numbers to rank better. Okay, so, but the FIS guide is actually really good too. It only has about maybe 300 schools in it, but it really breaks it down in a deep level and takes it from kind of the surface level to almost like you're on campus. It talks about information about what campus life is like. What are the things that you need to, again, kind of be aware of going to the school? Okay, so those are really two good resources. I know this one for sure is on Amazon. It's about $20. A couple students have already bought it, and they really tend to like it. But it does take some reading, okay, believe it or not. So our team is built up of all these different people. Okay, the student is the primary person in charge. Okay, and as scary and sometimes bummer that is, it's also highly exciting. All right, this is a really big process. Okay. And for a lot of students, it's really one of their first steps into kind of adulthood in the sense that we can't do this for them, really. We can do some elements, and some people try to do some things for their kids, but it usually does not end super well. Okay, so it's really a process that we as the adults get the opportunity to step back in and kind of give them the opportunity to step into that challenge. All right, but the student's the main person. I would say the family and you, like other family members and adults involved in that child's life, are kind of the secondary layer. If it was a bubble, the student would be at the center, the family and family unit would be right around it. Okay, you're the person that's probably going to be the most go-to in terms of like everyday help, things like that. School, myself, teachers, different people on campus, we kind of cover that next layer. We're going to come in and we see your student pretty frequently, okay, but I'm not like meeting with your kid every day, okay, but your teachers are, and like we're talking about different things, but we're definitely this kind of cover-all layer, and absolutely we want that line of communication to be open. And we're going to talk about that too. But these are these people that are going to be key to helping you have a successful and hopefully I won't say stress-free, but lower stress than you need senior year. Okay, because that's the goal, and ultimately that's the process. If you do this process wisely, you reduce your overall stress. How many of you guys know a senior that was pretty stressed out this year? Yeah. It's a pretty busy year. Think about your junior year and then add AP college applications to that list. Okay, because it's about the same amount of work as another AP class. Okay, so you want to really use the resources and kind of engage with some of those different support systems. All right, so some of our timelines. So, we are kind of in this phase right now. So 9th grade to now, just today. All right, so realistically, we are in the researching, planning, potentially testing and thinking phase. There's no active things that have to be done yet. It's really kind of this getting ready. We're preparing for the trip. We're packing up. We're getting the things. We're checking off the list of all the stuff that we need to take the journey through senior year. So coming up in September and December is typically when the vast majority of almost all four-year college applications And starting to get into like the end of December, November is when most 2-year college applications start being fulfilled and submitted. All right. So that fall is a busy time frame in terms of the to-do list of the college process. All right. In November and December, if students are going to be taking testing, like the ACT or the SAT, for example, most students are going to want to finish that by those 2 test dates. Many schools will, if they're taking those tests, will not take tests that go beyond December most frequently. Some schools, and depending on how you apply, which we'll get to, it might be an earlier deadline. Okay, so that's an important thing to really be paying attention to. Going into kind of like October through March, all right, kind of in that winter time frame. October 1st is when the FAFSA or the California Dream Act opens up. And so that is your financial aid application. Okay. Students who have a social security number in the United States will fill out the FAFSA. Free application for federal student aid is what that acronym stands for. We will be talking with you a lot about financial aid next year. I just want you to put, there's nothing that you can do about it right now other than do your taxes. Okay, which hopefully you've done. But that is a big component. We will be spending a lot of time with that. The state of California thinks it's such a big deal, they actually made it requirement. Okay, so they are going to expect that you complete the FAFSA or the California Dream Act or provide an opt-out form starting next year for that. And so that's a requirement. And so we'll be spending more time. That window of time in California runs from October 1st to March 2nd. So it's a big window of time to get it done. And it's not a really hard process as long as you have kind of all your paperwork together. Okay, so we will actually have a whole financial aid night in the fall where we'll talk about cost of college, we'll talk about scholarships, financial aid, FAFSA, all this stuff about that mostly parents want to know. Kids are like, I want to go wherever. And the parents are like, no, you're not. The parents want to know about the money piece mostly. Okay, we'll talk about that because that's a whole different side of the spectrum. Right now, when we're talking about lists in college, I think it's important to be aware of college costs and more so from this idea of diversity. You do not want to apply to all schools that cost $200,000 over the course of 4 years if you don't want to pay $200,000 over the course of 4 years. You want to diversify. Okay, so you want different looks. You want different looks admissions-wise as well. Okay, and so that's an important piece that we'll spend time on. We'll break down how it works as well. December through May, we're looking at mostly scholarship applications. So we've submitted most applications through that fall-winter time frame. All right, we get into kind of the spring, late winter, and we start having scholarships come out. Okay, anybody want to guess how much money I raised it. How much money the community gave away last year? Well, I'll say this year. I know how much.
$500,000. 3 million?
No, lower than that. Unfortunately, too much. Almost $1 million. Just the Tahoe community to 100 kids. Okay, it's a lot of money. All right, and the great news is the number of scholarships and the amount of the scholarships have gone up most years. Okay, so the community really wants to be involved in your education. Okay, but it takes some work on your part. You got to do the application, you got to follow the directions, and you got to do it well. All right. If you do those things, good chance you're going to be rewarded well. Even if you do the 1 hour application and get a letter of recommendation, write an essay, and you get $1,000 scholarship, I would quit my job for $1,000 an hour. Most people probably would, right? That's a lot of money. And so ultimately, you have a lot of opportunities. And so, we'll talk about financial aid in a deeper thing later. May 1st used to be nationally considered the college decision day, where you place a deposit by this day and this is the deadline and all this other stuff. Some changes happened at the national level with some organizations and they can't do that anymore. That's still kind of the agreed upon time frame. Okay, so by May 1st, most students will have decided where you're going to go and submitting a financial deposit and agreement that I'm going to show up in the fall. Okay. If you're looking at like a junior college, most students will want to be done right around April-ish, okay, because many students will actually be enrolling in classes around May and June for their next year before they even graduated from high school. I actually just had a student in my office today who couldn't get their class schedule up and they were enrolling in classes for next year at a 4-year college. So it actually trickles down into your senior year in May and June.
So the acceptance window, what is that?
So most schools, so if we apply in the fall, typically, so like say October through December, most schools will probably get back to you anywhere between January and April. It very much highly depends on the school. Your UCs are going to be mostly in April. Your CSUs might be pretty quicker. Montana State's like 2 weeks. It's really, so like we'll talk about the different admissions types because that also plays a factor in it as well. So, like I said, we have these kind of like things that we call these different types of schools. And again, these types of schools are dependent on you, the student. Okay. A reach school for one student might not be a reach school for another student and vice versa. Okay. So it depends on what you are bringing to the table. And this is just a rough guideline. Okay. A lot of people like preach this like this is the rules. This is not the rules. You do not need to have one of these, 3 of these, and 1 of these. You can have 5 of these, 1 of these, and none of these. Or 5 of these, 2 of these, and 1 of these. Okay. It's just you don't want one typically of just one. That's kind of what I mean by diversify. Okay. These are going to be schools that, a reach school is going to be, many times you might classify it by admissions rate. You can find their admissions rates online. Okay. These are going to be schools that probably admit 20% or less of their kids. Okay. 8 out of 10 kids aren't getting into that school when they apply. And they're not 8 out of 10 kids that are not like me. They're 8 out of 10 who are kids who are just like me. Okay. Kids who are very well qualified and very well prepared. All right. Meet and fit are going to be related to, you're kind of in that middle ground of my GPA is about like this. I feel like if I did my test, here's my test scores, here's my academic experience and things like that. I'm falling in kind of the sweet spot of this school still might be a little challenging, but ultimately I might have a pretty good shot. And these guys down here these are not easy schools, and safety is the word that used to be used. Okay, no school is safe, 0. Okay, you can get declined from any school you apply to. All right, and you'd be surprised. More students are kind of like getting surprised in this day and age than less. But these expected kind of safety level schools are really where you are above and beyond what their average admissions class is. I always throw around Montana State and I love Montana State. We send a lot of students there every single year. They're great. And they have a really quick turnaround process. Students love it. They give money to our kids. They have the WUI. Okay. But they're generally pretty safe for most of our students. Sac State's the other same way. Okay. They're our local CSU. So realistically, if you meet A through G requirements and have a 2.5 GPA, hypothetically, you should be getting into Sacramento State. Okay. That is their mission and their goal. Okay. So that's what maybe an example of a safety or expected likely school might look like. 2-year college application list. The list is a whole lot shorter. You got 1. Okay. You do all of your research and all of your planning in advance in the junior college world, and then you enroll. That's the beauty of junior college, is that it's not a accept or decline application process. It is you're going to get in. There are very few programs at junior colleges in California that are competitive, meaning like you're going to get denied. All right. So that's one of the benefits is then, you do all your research, you find the right school for you, you figure out if that's the right place, and then you just submit your application or your enrollment form and you get ready to go. All right. The problem is when people don't do their research in advance. They're like, Santa Barbara is a great place to go. And they never really looked into the Santa Barbara City College at all. And they just go there. Okay. Your college is more than a town and place you're going to live in. It is an important factor, right? But it's something that you want to, again, spend just as much time as you're doing for the 4-year college application process as you would be for a junior college process as well. So we mentioned some different application types. And believe it or not, there are quite a few. An overwhelmingly large number of applications. I'm going to highlight the main ones that we see. So probably for our students, the number 1 applications that most students will do are our CSU and UC applications. All right, they're 2 separate applications. The CSU apply system will do all this California State University institutions. So your Sac States, your Sonoma States, your Cal Poly SLOs, your Cal Poly Humboldt. Did you know that? They changed their name. And then we have the UC system, which is a separate application itself. And you got the different Berkeleys and UCLAs and Santa Barbaras and San Diegos and that kind of stuff in the UC system. Okay. Both of those I put up here are Common App. The reason I put, quote, low C, low A, little c, little a, Common App is because there is a formal common application, big C, big A organization. Okay. When I say little c, little a, they're common because you apply to any UC that you want to apply to through one portal and any CSU that you want to apply to through one portal. Okay, it's one application for all the schools in each of those categories. Okay, probably the second most common one is this common application, big C, big A, the organization. And so there's about, I want to say it's up to almost 800 schools now that are under the common application. Most of these schools are going to be private or out-of-state public institutions. Okay, you're not going to see any California state institution, and you very rarely see any public state institution. All right, there's a few, but not many. So this is going to be your Stanfords and your and maybe not so highly selective institutions as well. But there's about 800 schools, including international. Okay, so if you're looking international, you might find it there. The benefit of doing this common application versus going like piecemeal to each individual college is you do all the work in one place, and then you spit it out to however many schools you might need to apply to. There will be a few subset of questions. They call them gosh, I'm blanking on the word. They ask like personal insight questions on the UC app, but specific to that college. They might have a particular writing response that college wants to know more about. Why Stanford, or whatever it might be. How many ping pong balls fit in a bus? Like sometimes really weird kind of questions like that. Probably the next one is going to be a school-specific application. That would be a great Montana State application example. They use their own specific portal, okay, and that's the only one that they use. Okay, so you just go straight to their website, submit an application through there, and that would be, if sometimes you'll have multiple options. You might have they're on the Common App, but you can go straight to the school as well. You have to make a decision. Am I applying to other schools on the Common App or just this one? Oftentimes it's just that one. It might be easier to go straight to the school. Okay, so you have to that's where that list and kind of know where you fall comes into play. The Coalition app, that's kind of a new thing in the last couple of years. I don't love it. Some schools require it, very few though. If you can avoid it, I would probably encourage you to do so. If it's unavoidable, we'll help you with it, but it's most students, like University of Washington is one of them. University of Maryland is another one. Some Florida schools, things like that. Okay, but generally speaking, most students don't need to use it. You might have a choice between Common App and Coalition. I would use the Common App over Coalition. It's just my advice. It's not as well looked on in the college admissions world. Any questions so far? We got a lot more stuff to do, but I want to just pause. And am I going too slow, too fast? Okay. Silence is always good, I think. So we have a couple different options in terms of how we apply. Okay, and this is kind of important as we're doing our research. Okay. Because there's different things we need to know about the time frame and the consequences, good or bad, of submitting certain types of applications. So this is broken up into 5 different categories. On, I guess, your left, you have what's called the non-restrictive application plans. And what that means is you can submit as many of those applications as you want to as many different schools as you want. Okay. So probably the most frequent one you'll see is regular decision. That's your standard. You submit an application by this date. You hear back a couple months later by this date. Pretty simple. Okay. Rolling admissions means that you are going to submit an application. They usually have an early open date, say October 1st, and they'll have a final date, say June 1st. And what they do is someone could submit an application October 1st. They might be accepted by October 10th. And they just process admissions as they get them. Okay, that's what Montana State does. That's what places like UNR typically does. They have this rolling admissions plan, meaning you're going to hear back pretty frequently and pretty quick with your admissions decision. Most typically, schools that offer rolling admissions are not towards the lower end of the admissions percentage, meaning they are accepting most of their students or more of their students than not. Okay. And typically, they're mainly looking for, are you meeting our minimum qualifications? And if so, you probably have a decent spot. Okay. And they might have different qualifications based on your major and things. But generally speaking, it is a nice thing. If you have a school with a rolling admissions, it's nice to get that kind of early October pat on the back. Good job. I can go to college now, in your books if you have one of those schools that are on your list. Early action, and this is where it gets a little confusing. Early action is the non-restrictive application plan. And what that means is so we have this, and usually you'll have like regular decision with one of these other options up here. You usually don't have these two. You have like regular decision and early action, or early decision and regular decision. Like you can have a choice. And so if someone decided, you know what, I'm going to apply early action, say we're applying to Boise State, and they have a regular decision, their application opens on November 1st. Their regular decision deadline is February 1st. Okay. What early action means is opens on November 1st. Their early action deadline might be December 15th. Okay. And so if you're applying under this application type, you need to have this in by this date. It really does not help you, the student. Okay. And this is where I think a lot of people get confused. Early action is not a benefit for the student. Early action is a benefit for the college. Okay. So generally speaking, unless you are 110% sure your application is ready, you might not want to submit early action just to submit early action. Okay. You're going to hear back. The only benefit you're getting is you might hear back a little bit sooner, which in the grand scheme of things, if you talk to any of your seniors, most students, if you did early action, you're still going to wait on those other schools that are regular decision, most likely, to weigh your options, look at the financial aid options and things like that. Okay. So realistically, you might not want to rush the process to submit early if you're really not ready to. So just really be aware of that. Okay, so these are the non-restrictive options, meaning you can apply anywhere that you want with those places. These guys are restrictive application plans. And so what that means, and most typically, you don't see a whole lot of restrictive early action. Stanford's one of them. There's a few others. We're going to focus on this one, ED, or early decision. What restrictive means is you can submit one early decision application to one single school. Okay, and what that means, and you're signing a legal agreement. You are signing it, the student. You are signing it, the parent. I am signing that I went over it with you. It's a big deal. It's not one of the iTunes agreements that you want to read through and be like, yep, I agree. And then, because what they're saying is, here's how it works. You submit this application, usually same kind of time frame as early action, maybe October 15th, due November 15th for the early decision deadline. Okay, you might know by December if you get in. Okay, so it has a very quick turnaround. And then what ends up happening is once you get a yes from an early decision school, you must rescind every other application that you've sent out and place an immediate financial deposit. Does that make sense? So it is a 200%, this is the school for me, and I can probably pay for most of it. Okay. So it is something just to be very, very, it's a good thing. It does have an admissions benefit to some level. We're not going to go into the whole kind of enrollment management process tonight, but realistically, they are looking for guaranteed people to show up on campus on the first day of school. Just because you're admitted, they don't actually get all the people that they admit on campus. They don't want all the people that they admit on campus, believe it or not. They only want a percentage of those students. And they do a whole lot of math and data science and kind of creepy big brothery things to figure all that information out. But these guys are for sure in the bag, call it yield, as creepy as that sounds. Okay, you're a yield number for them. And so it's just a big deal. It can help if there's like this bump in this really for sure school, but you have to just be very cautious with it as well. Okay. And if that's you, if you find yourself in that boat, like I want to do that, we're still going to have a conversation about it. I'm going to make sure that you know the rules and regulations and things like that. And you cannot do that to multiple schools. Okay. So it's one school. All right. So a couple application tips to consider. One of them, and this is a big one. I can't tell you how many applications I've looked at that. Did you even read through your application? Like you have numbers in your name. Like that is not supposed to be there. Like no joke. Like, and I think part of it is not even the student's fault. You get looking at this thing so much that you get blind to some of the really simple errors that are sticking out, right? And so this is where having other people involved in this process is pretty important. All right, so do review your application. Do ask for help. One thing that I do want to encourage students and families in this process is parents, please do not get involved in your child's essay before their first draft is completed. Please do not, because guess whose voice comes through? Yours. Guess who's not going to college? You. Okay? They want to know the authentic student's voice. And when you step in that process too early, it mutes it. Okay. Absolutely. Second, third draft, things like that. We got to review some of those things. We want it to be the best thing that we can submit, but we want it to be their best thing that they can submit, not ours. Okay. And so please do, students, ask for help as we're going through this process. I can't tell you how many students just go through this and ghost every other adult around them and think that they've got the best application in the world. Come to find out later on, why did I get to the school? Well, you put the wrong class on your application and you didn't let anybody look at it. Okay, so just do ask for help. That's what we're here for. Deadlines. This is a very sticky subject at North Tahoe High School and a lot of schools, but at our school too, because we're pretty lax with a lot of our deadlines, right? We are. Students, shake your head, yes. Okay. So they are not. When they say December 30th at 11:59 p.m., you better be asking, is it Eastern Standard Time or Pacific Standard Time? Okay. Because as soon as that thing hits, that server's shutting down. Doesn't matter if you're about like 2 numbers away from putting in your number on your credit card, it's not going in. And they are not going to open it back up for you. Okay, so deadlines are highly important. Honesty is also important. This is not the place where you want to fabricate material, make stuff up, embellish your activities, things like that. You want to speak highly upon yourself, but you want to be honest. Okay. They read thousands of essays and thousands of applications every single year. Their BS meter is very, very good. Okay. You are not going to trick anybody. And believe it or not, they will call. If they're like, did this kid really like save 25 elephants and like do all these other things? They're going to pick up their phone and call me. And I'm like, I don't think they've been to the zoo. So no. So like ultimately you have to realize they are going to see through the stuff that's not there. And then please pay attention. They're going to send emails. They're going to send notices. They're going to send updates. Okay. But you're the only one that gets them. They don't come to me. They don't come to your parents. They don't come to your teachers. They come to you. So that's where checking emails and like keeping up on your portals and different things along the process becomes super crucial. Whew. A lot of information. So let's talk about the huge elephant in the room, which is testing. It's changed quite a bit in the last couple of years. So before COVID, testing would have probably been a big component of this conversation because most juniors would have been starting that already, typically in kind of the springtime of their junior year. The landscape in testing has changed pretty drastically to where most juniors need tests in the past, where most juniors probably don't need tests at all. Okay, and so that's a real question where you have to know yourself as a student in terms of, is this a worthwhile time and energy expenditure on my part to prepare for these really challenging, difficult exams that might play into your process at some level, right? Pop quiz. Do the UCs take SATs or ACTs?
No.
No. Do the CSUs take SATs or ACTs?
No.
No. Who does?
Stanford.
Some. Most of the schools that actually, so like your question would be, do they require them? You're going to be looking at mainly your military institutions, so your West Points and Air Force academies, a few Florida schools, some Texas schools, but they actually relaxed some of their rules recently as well. Okay, and most everybody else is either test blind or test optional. Okay, where test optional means you can choose, and so that's where I'm saying you need to know yourself as a student. If you, the student, is walking home every day, man, I hate testing. Gosh, testing sucks. Oh my gosh, I'm a horrible test taker. This is the worst thing in the world. You probably should not be worrying about the SAT. Doing a couple-hour prep course is not going to make you this magical test taker. Okay, and you probably will have a stronger application without it. Okay, but it is an option. Okay, so if you do take a test, you do not have to report it. Okay, so you can still play with it and see how it works and see how it goes. But again, you have to look at value for energy and money. Is it going to be a worthwhile investment? Because it is an investment of time, energy, a couple hours on Saturday, $50 or $60 to pay for it, and then the time you're going to spend getting ready for it. Okay, so you just have to know yourself. And realistically, if you take it and you don't end up submitting it, there's no harm, no foul. Okay, but just you have to know yourself.
Is there a weighted advantage with some of the schools when an SAT score is included?
No. So the question was, is there a weighted advantage if you submit a score or not? At test optional schools, no. And that's the exact reason why. Is because if they can't compare a student that has one that doesn't, okay, they just have different ways to factor it into the admissions process. So another thing to think about too, if you're thinking about testing and that kind of stuff, is if I apply with a test and I have stellar test scores, it might maybe open up some opportunities for my other aspects of my application to not quite be as stellar. But vice versa, if you don't have stellar test scores and you submit it, it might detract from an otherwise stellar application. Okay, so there's some strategy that you have to kind of think about with the world of testing. Typically, if you are going to test, like I said, November, December is kind of a target date to have all of your testing completed by. Most students that are going to go down the testing route and want to submit them will not just take it one time. 2 or 3 times is pretty frequently common. Okay. The other thing is ACT and SAT are pretty interchangeable. They have concordance tables. They can connect the 2 scores together statistically. So like if you wanted to take the ACT and those 2 want to take the SAT, they can be compared like for like. Okay, so there's no harm, no foul in terms of that.
Y'all giving them the SAT or the ACT here, right?
We don't do either of them here. So we do the PSAT, which is over for juniors. That was in October. SATs and ACTs are all signed up for and done outside of the school system itself. So you go to the ACT website or the SAT website, and they will take the payment. You'll sign up for a testing location. Squaw, Galena, Reno, Carson are probably our closest areas that students would go that have testing locations at some of the larger high schools typically. We talked a little about like this. So at least half of them, and this number goes up every single year. I would say by this time this year, we're probably looking at 1,800 schools that are test optional. So that's most, okay, that you'll find. And that's 4-year colleges, so not including 2 years, it doesn't matter. All right. So how do we do some of this process called research? So how do we actually start building this list? Because that's where many of you guys might be right now. So we kind of covered some of the content with the big picture of what the process looks like. What are some things to be aware of in the process? But how do we actually go from today when maybe we don't have any list to having a list, which you will probably need by about September. So you got about 3 months. Okay. Pretty quick if you actually, think about it. It is tedious, but you need to have this target. And so what we're going to do is really look at this idea of priorities. Like I said, FIT is all about priorities. And so up here on the screen, I broke it down into 3 columns again, but really simple. This is what I do to kind of start when we're using these tools, Big Future, any of these like Naviance tools or Score or things like that. A lot of the search engines, you have to you usually aren't, you could go straight to the school that you're looking for, but you're going to want to find other ones. And so you're going to be able to plug in what is the size? How many students are in the school? What's the location? What's the admissions percentage? Here's my GPA. How does that fit in? And a lot of these research pieces are going to fall and take these pieces here. So these are, if you had a piece of paper and you had 3 columns, it doesn't have to be anything fancy, 3 columns, you could have put some priorities in this must-have category. These are the things that are essential for me as a student. Okay, it must be within 30 minutes of the beach. It must be a 25,000 person school or larger. It must have a women's lacrosse team. Whatever your must-haves, deal breaker things, that's what needs to show up here. Okay, don't overdo it. Okay, 10 or 20 things is going to kind of weed out too much information. Pick a couple. All right, and then the same thing. These are kind of like the nice to haves. These are not the deal breakers. It's going to be a hard no if it doesn't have this, but it's these are bonus points. If it has those 2 things and then these 3 things, ranking pretty high up there on my list. These are the things I might like. Hey, maybe it has brand new dorms. The food options are pretty good. They have a Tesla charging place there or something weird. And then also the must not haves. Okay, so the must not haves are important too. Again, these are the blinder questions. What are the things that I don't want to see on campus? Okay, it could be a particular climate on campus. Maybe it's political climate. Maybe it's LGBT friendly. Maybe it's having access to certain resources on campus or not. Okay, some people really care about, say, having a dry campus or something. Those are the things that you might have. Okay, and these will help eliminate options because again, 2,000 schools, you got to narrow that list down to do any type of meaningful research. So here's some examples. So some really important things. Again, schools of a certain size, maybe research of availability. So ability to research with the professor by my sophomore year. Okay, that's something you can look up and research. Okay, it might be having the availability of in-state financial aid or WUI, the Western Undergraduate Exchange Program. Some nice things might be a curling team, having 2 years available on campus housing. Okay, housing can be tricky at some campuses. You might be guaranteed a single year on campus, and then you're kicked out in San Francisco with $2,000 for a box in a box. Okay, so you have to kind of think some of those things. And then some other things might be no more than a flight that, like more than a 5-hour flight from home. Okay, that might be important to somebody. Might not have this large gap, which we're not talking about tonight, and maybe schools that don't provide certain supports available. Okay, so those are some examples of how do we start organizing some of the things that really matter to us. And I don't know, I talk to students, and I don't know if students, if you feel the same way, but sometimes it's hard to think about our priorities. Like, what does that actually mean? Having research available by my sophomore year. Why would I even want that? Okay. That's where that hard thinking and asking questions really comes into play. Okay. Don't kind of like go through in this haze. Stop and be like, I don't even know what that means. And come ask someone, ask me, ask a teacher, ask anybody. Just ask an adult, and they can help connect you with some of those different resources that do know the answer. All right. So we do want to kind of like slow down slightly, because what ends up happening is we end up kind of like I put up there, putting the cart before the horse. A lot of students really like think really hard about this idea of college, but never really thought about, what do I want out of college? Like, why am I going to college? What is the point? Okay, what am I going to get from it other than the value of learning? Okay. And so we need to narrow down this target. And I kind of used car shopping as an example. Have you guys all shopped for a car? I shopped for a car this year and it sucked. It's not even here yet. But, we do not go car shopping and just walk in, give me the first thing with an engine and 4 wheels. But that's kind of what we do in college sometimes, this process. I want to go to college. Why? What do you need? What do you want it for? Like, what are the goals around your experience in college? Every student's going to have a little bit different needs, okay? And they all will, all these cars can get you to where you want to go. They will all get you to a degree, but they might get you there in a different fashion, at a different cost and price point, and with maybe a different amount of fun or practicality, okay? So this student here might really have some close family ties or responsibilities that maybe want to keep them closer to home, okay? So the family element might be really important to the person with the van. This student might really want to accelerate. Maybe they want to go to a 4+1 bachelor's and master's program. So they need that sports car. That's going to be the best fit for them. This student might really want to attend a junior college and then load up and get, save some of that money and carry some of that experience with them into that 4-year college experience for the last 2 years of their bachelor's degree. Okay, so students, when you're building this list, I want to encourage you to stop and really think about, what do I want out of this? Okay, what do I want? And I know it's a really hard question. I still don't know what I want sometimes. Okay, but it's really tough, and it's almost more important than moving forward until you've started to kind of identify, at least at some level, some of those interests. What do I want to need out of this college experience? Probably one of the larger investments of your time, energy, and money of most people's lives, until they maybe definitely buy a house in Tahoe, but buy a house or have a family. Okay, it's a pretty big deal, and I think that, but it's worth the slow research and being methodical about the process and not rushing through it. All right. So I was like, okay, so I talked to students, and probably the top things that students want to do are engineer, doctor, nurse, teacher. Didn't ruin all of them yet. They want to be teachers, so that's good. And then like police officer, law enforcement. Okay, so those are probably the top 4 things that students, or firefighting, things like that, like public service type thing. Okay, those are probably the top 4 things that most students want to do. Okay, the problem with some of those things, and those are all great things, we need all of those things, but some of the problems with that is we're only focusing on this kind of top level of what maybe that job or career, or a very surface level job or career. In the medical field, 8%, so everyone says, I want to be a doctor. 8% of people in the medical industry are doctors. 92% are something else. And they all get paid very well and all do very good work and also are very respected. And so sometimes we skip over some of the essential roles in these other industries. So we need the nurses, we need the radiologists, technicians, and x-ray technicians, and different people that are not just that pinnacle career that we seem to gravitate towards. Okay? We need the drafters and the CAD drawers, not just the engineers. Okay, and so just because you're not necessarily targeting that top level career does not mean that your path will not be valuable or meaningful. Okay. And I think it's really important to think deeply, consider the trade-offs or different paths that might be available to you. Okay. If you are interested in the medical field, but you hate school, being a doctor is probably not for you. Right now, at least. Okay. You're going to be in a lot of school. Very hard school to be a doctor. Okay. But maybe there might be a different path that still lets you have interaction with that same interest area, but doesn't take 8 or 10 years to go to school and a bunch of money and things like that. Okay, so there's different ways and different paths to get to what you want. So everything that we do, and the goal for us is that everything, this is our map to our future. There's always going to be an on-ramp, and there's always going to be an off-ramp to something else throughout your careers. How many of you guys are in the same career you started with? Adults. There's like 3 hands. I am not either. Okay. And so like I started my college degree process as an aerospace engineer. No, thank you. Thank God I'm not designing airplanes anymore, because that would not be good for anybody flying. But I had an on-ramp and I had an off-ramp. And that off-ramp was really good for me. Off-ramps can sometimes, it was not fun. Not always fun getting off your plan, but it was very important. Okay, and so I want you to remember that too. Students, as you go through this process as well, you're probably going to be disappointed. There will be rejections, and that's hard to take. They did not want me. Okay, got to kind of take your that personal perspective. It's less of they didn't want me, it just wasn't right now. Okay, and so the good news is if you do this diversely and do this right, you can have a lot of different on-ramps and off-ramps to decide that many of them are all going in the same direction and will get you to the same place. Okay, so this chart, talk briefly about financial aid just because we wouldn't be talking college without money. But this chart is kind of thrown around, and it's from my least favorite news source. They don't really do a good job with all this stuff, but I like it because it just explains a little bit of the differences. And anytime you're looking at numbers related to college, one thing to remember, you're looking at it before financial aid comes into play. Okay, so you're looking at kind of like if I paid sticker price for college, this is probably what it would be. And you'd want to make sure that you're looking also, is it tuition and fees plus room and board or not? Because I'm guessing most private schools, that's just tuition. That is not your housing, which adds probably double that amount at most places. Okay, so it's really important to kind of look overall at the average costs because you want to, again, diversify. You don't want to apply to all pricey schools. You don't want to ignore pricey schools either, though. Okay, those private schools, guess who has the most money to give away? Private schools. CSUs, UCs, they're not giving away merit-based aid. They're giving need-based aid. Okay, these private schools, they're given need-based aid and merit-based aid, depending on what you bring to the table. So I've seen many circumstances where student was priced out of a UC or a CSU, and going to a private school not only guaranteed them to get through school in 4 years, where that's a challenge in most CSUs and UCs now, they did it for cheaper and maybe left with less student loans and things like that. So it's not something that I want you to like ignore the private schools because their price point. You just don't want to only apply there. Diversify that process there. We're not going to kind of cover some of these things. The biggest thing I'm going to reiterate in relation to financial aid is observe deadlines. They are hard and fast too. Okay, if it says March 2nd, it's due March 2nd, and you might be losing a whole pot of money if you don't have it in by then. So generally speaking, only about 75% of our students have submitted the FAFSA in the past. About 25% of people might be leaving money on the table. The FAFSA just gives colleges information. It doesn't actually give you money. The colleges all give you money. And so they just give information to help them decide what money to give you and what money you qualify for. So by not filling out the FAFSA, one example of some of the stuff that might be lost would be some of those merit-based scholarships that might be available to you. You might not qualify for because you did not fill out the FAFSA. Because sometimes they need that information to make determinations about how they're going to spend their money. So a couple tips and tricks to kind of wrap us up. We kind of talked a little bit about that. So again, start early. That's why we're having this meeting now and not in the fall. In the fall, believe it or not, we're going to have a very similar meeting to this. As a reminder, now we are going to do these things. Let's get started. So we will change a little bit of this, but it'll be a lot of refresher. Okay, so this whole point of this process is to get you going now and start kind of getting your brain marinating in some of this process. You have not really had a whole lot of opportunities to probably volunteer. with COVID and really, understandable reasons why. Okay. But, if you have opportunities and you want to and you feel safe doing that, like there's still time to get out and find some volunteer opportunities. Working is a great opportunity. So like some of those kind of extracurricular activities that make you more than just a transcript are important to colleges. They want, so they're crafting two things. One is an academic class. Who are these people on paper and how are they going to be in our classroom and in our environment as a learner? But they're also crafting a community. Okay, so they also want to know, how is this person going to fit in with our school? How is this person going to contribute to our dorms, contribute to our clubs or different environments that make college so much fun? Because if college was just sitting in a classroom, not that many people would probably go. It's so much of those other things that make it very enjoyable. And so they're really using the information on your application to determine how well you fit in both of those pots of gold. All right. There is a senior profile that you might want to get started with. If you're taking your English class here, you probably are, she mentioned, I think probably Miss Lefevers or Mr. Nell or someone mentioned that. Okay. They usually kind of start poking that out there right about now. That's a good thing to start working on. It's not due. There's not a due date. It's really for your letters of recommendation, which we will cover in the fall. Okay. But that is a really good, important brag sheet for us who spend a lot of time writing on your behalf. We need to know. We don't spend all of our days with you. So we need to know what you're doing outside of school and stuff like that. That make you really, really cool. Once again, we are moving out of Naviance. So, Naviance was not really used over COVID all that much just because we didn't have the opportunity and kind of access to really train most of our students over that. If you're using it in Pathways, a lot of junior Pathways might be using it. It still will be accessible through July 1st. Okay. After July 1st, we'll be transitioning to this program called SCORE. It looks kind of like this. It's actually very, I think it's better than Naviance in a lot of ways, but it will be different. I'm not 100% sure on when that will become available though. So I want to give you a heads up now. If you want to do any of that research using Naviance, which does have a really cool college search tool, before July 1st would be a good opportunity to do that. Okay. Just knowing, I'm hoping that we can have it kind of mostly seamless where you can like log in, you'll log in with Clever like you do in a lot of other apps that we use and things like that. And it should be relatively self-explaining for a lot of things. So like if you're in July, you're like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'll probably have a link up there. If you want to try it, go for it. I just don't know exactly when it's going to be ready for you, but for sure by the fall. This is a picture of kind of what it looks like on our college application and information website. Some of those resources are kind of down in this area down here that I mentioned, like that Fit Kit, some of those different tools that you can print out and utilize. That's a really good thing to do between now and kind of July. So you can spend some of that time over the summertime on your computer or maybe taking a visit to a college or things like that when you have maybe a little bit more availability. But you can find the senior profile. There's like a scavenger hunt Excel spreadsheet with all the stuff maybe to look for that you might need for college information. A cost estimator that lets you compare options at the end of the game. So there's a lot of resources you can actually look up here. For example, like this is that scavenger hunt where it just kind of like tells you these are the important pieces that you might need. So you can kind of look at it and sort things and kind of do that. You can do that on paper too, just in place, if you're a spreadsheet type of person. The UC system does, did I put anything in here? I did not mention essays. I will mention essays real quick. And then we'll wrap up. But essays are going to be another thing to start thinking about over the summertime. Not every school will require them. CSUs do not have a written component to it, so they not require writing in their application. It's one of the easier applications to actually submit. The UCs and many of the private schools, all the Common App schools do require a writing component. You can look up those prompts now. Okay. Typically, they would have announced already if they're changing them, so I'm pretty confident they will be the same next year. I would not necessarily get too far into the writing process right now. It's still, but like, again, letting your brain marinate in the prompt. Think about your experiences. Think about what that would mean. Okay, this is not your stereotypical English essay that you just want to kind of bust out and kind of BS your way through. This is like, just like the interview example. This is you sitting in front of someone, talking to them about you, telling them why should I be there. Okay, and it's your one chance. Okay, in 250 words or less to say that. So it's really an important, valuable piece. You can look it up on the UC website. They have 8 questions to respond to that they have to choose from, and they have to pick 4 of them, for example. Okay. The Common App will have a generic, longer form college essay that they'll write for all the schools that they apply to. And then many of the colleges will add what they call supplemental essays that are specific to that school or institution. Okay. So really be brainstorming about what are the things, look it up and like, what do I think about these questions? Like, and start writing, start a little like outline or a brainstorming board or things like that might be helpful in kind of really thinking about these things. This example, you have 4 questions. You probably should write 5 or 6. I know you hate to do extra work, but believe it or not, when people only write 4 and I ask them or I tell them, write a 5th one, usually one of those 4 was not the best one. They read the 5th one and it was better, and they actually include one of those extra ones that they weren't planning on writing initially because it was the harder question to answer. Because you pick the easy ones usually first, right? The ones that like, oh, that's a piece of cake to answer. Those usually are not the most meaningful ones. They don't make you think. Okay, the harder ones, the ones that challenge you, will actually probably bring out more of what they want to see. Information on the Common App, that's that the website there. And there's a bunch of other links. I will post this with the video if you want to access any of these links. I am 100% want you to ask questions and like come in and set up times. We will have a meeting time in the fall. If you did your ILP this year, we'll have a meeting kind of similar but more focused on this type of stuff for most seniors in the fall of this year. We'll get started pretty quick in September where I'm gonna probably want to know more about, tell me where you're at in this process. Talk to me about your list if you have one. What are we missing? I noticed these things on your list that I see there's like this random one that doesn't fit. Tell me why that's on there. Okay. And starting that conversation about this process. Okay. This process really doesn't start until the fall. So there's nothing like action items that you have to checklist off other than starting to get ready for those action items. Okay. It's 6:09. I think we are probably about done. Are there any questions that I can answer for the group right this second? Any like burning questions that feel like everyone needs to know this answer? Yes.
I think I have one.
Sure.
So when you're applying, I know mostly private schools give more college merit-based scholarships. So how do you know when you get an acceptance how much money you would get? Because I know the UCs and the CSUs just won't give you anything usually.
Yeah. So kind of the process
to balance the choices.
Yeah. So usually, unless you're like an early decision applicant who's like applying very early in the fall timeframe, most college decisions are coming out when the financial aid application information has already been submitted for most people. And so usually you'll get an admissions decision from a college, and then usually a couple weeks later, you'll come with a financial aid decision that goes with it. A lot of times it's not the same time. It's usually delayed by a little bit of time. But then that's where kind of that May 1st deadline
so you have
comes
like a
into
month
play.
notice.
Usually you have about a good chunk of April to compare. And that's why that kind of early action, what I was saying earlier, is like realistically you could apply to a bunch of early action schools, but you're probably still going to wait for the rest of your schools to come in most cases. And so there's not really all that much of a benefit to you of actually rushing through. So ultimately, you'll see all the different financial aid opportunities. And like I said, it might surprise you. You never know. You're not going to see a whole lot of merit-based aid unless you're an athlete or like tuba player or something like that at most of our CSUs, like a true athletic scholarship or something like that. They do have a lot of, we'll talk more about like the true state aid and things like that. There's Blue and Gold Scholarship, the Cal Grants and things like that, that have some levels of merit in it. Like some Cal Grants have a GPA qualifier, for example, but they also have like a need qualifier as well. So yeah, so most students will have about a month to really truly compare kind of all the options financially. And that's where some of those different comparison tools kind of come into play. It's like really seeing how all the numbers all pan out. Because you'd be surprised that your first choice school might really quickly become your third choice school, depending on how the finances play. Yeah.
I know you don't want to hear this, but because the
Well,
financial aid question, if your kid is going to be 18 going through this process, does like they take it all on themselves? Is the like still the parent?
Financially?
Yes.
So no,
Yeah.
your children are dependent until they're 26.
Okay.
Yes. For better or for worse, they're 26 until they're 26 for insurance, but also 26 for financial aid purposes. So no, you're not. Then college would be free for everyone because who makes a ton of money as an 18-year-old? Nobody, right? So everyone just go to school and just like, I don't make any money, give me all the need-based aid. That's not really how it works. So unfortunately, no.
Yeah, but if you choose not to claim them on your taxes,
Doesn't
then
matter.
can't they? Oh,
Nope.
interesting.
No,
Did not
you just
know
don't get
that.
the benefit of having them on your taxes.
Okay.
Or else, again, no one would claim them on their taxes. The only way to not do that is if you're a foster youth or if you are legally emancipated. That's not like they don't live with me. I don't see them ever. No, the judge legally emancipates you as an adult. Like it's not an easy process. I mean, and sometimes they'll even not even look at that. So yeah, it's really difficult. You're kind of on the hook, unfortunately.
Till 26.
Yeah, 26, 24, 26, something like that. Till they're mid 20s. Yeah.
And the kids probably know this, but do they use their personal email address or their school email address?
Personal, absolutely. Professional, personal. I would suggest Gmail has 1 million free email addresses. Make one just for college applications. Because you know what? Like, I know my personal email has a bunch of spam and crap I don't read and all that other stuff. The last thing you want to do is skip over an important email because you thought it was an ad. And it was, you have 1 day to submit your deposit or else you're kicked out. Okay? Make one just for college. You can even forward it to the other one, but that way you can at least log in, check it to make sure that you're going to do that. Just like make it professional sounding. Using your name is always a good thing and some numbers.
When you're talking about letters of recommendation, do most institutions want one from you in addition to teachers?
All Common App schools will get one from me.
All Common App, okay.
And then most other ones that are on the Common App usually will just be teachers.
Okay.
But we'll cover that process mostly in the fall because many times that's when most teachers are going to want to get that notice from their students. They're not going to be doing your rec letter over the summer.
No.
Sorry to break it to you. But yeah, we'll go over that senior profile and that kind of stuff at our next meeting in the fall. I'll stick around for a few minutes if you have any other questions. Thank you all for coming in. Sorry for the confusion earlier. I apologize. Thank you. Glad you all made it up here. It is really hot in here.
Yeah.
All right, you guys have a great evening.